Yeah, 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 yeah. Can we just go back to the simple kind of living? Can we just go back and maybe start from the beginning? Back to better days when love was for the giving. Can we just go back to the way we were?
Welcome to Generations. We're back. Ashley and I are so excited to have you back, and we're excited about this show today. And the name of our show is Mental Health Solutions. Okay, we are excited about all the wisdom that we're going to learn, and we know that after this show, you're going to be blessed. And so call somebody that you know, that you love, and that you care about, and tell them to tune in. Ashley, Mental Health Solutions.
It's very important.
Very important. You know, for years, for generations, it's kind of been a stigma to talk about this. And I'm so glad that now people are talking more about it.
Yeah, I think one of the themes that I'm hearing is like giving people permission to know like it's okay to not be okay, especially when you're living in crazy times and circumstances that you can't control. Figuring out how to check in with yourself and like, how am I doing? How are you really doing? Because I think even though it's a lot more popular to talk about, I think there's still some people who aren't very comfortable dealing with the topic of mental health and talking about their anxiety or talking about their depression. I feel like there is still a lot of shame and just confusion. People just don't know what's going on
I think
with themselves.
Is definitely a part of it.
I think it's important that we keep talking about it in line with the Word of God and seeing how God has created us mind, soul, body, spirit, and how we can manage it all and be encouraged with it. So I think it's super important.
Which brings us to our incredible guest today, Caroline Leaf. If you have not heard her, you're going to be so blessed today, and I encourage you to follow her, and because she came to our church a few years back now, and it was incredible. She talked about I forget what country, but the traditions that they had that really helped with mental health issues, and that was the importance of connecting. She was telling us, I remember her saying how this one place had benches at different places, different benches where people could sit down and talk because it's so important to connect.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you can be in a family and with people and not really check on people and not know what they're going through.
Right.
So it's important to check on one another, like, Ashley, how you doing?
Absolutely.
Because we all go through troubling times and we all get overwhelmed with certain things. You being a new mom, you know what that's all about.
Yeah.
And so it's important that we just don't assume that we're okay.
Yeah, and the importance of utilizing your community and utilizing, your family, your church family, your small group, being intentional about connecting and having conversations, because it is so easy with just the age we're in and technology. We are quick to just isolate. We're not trying to isolate, I don't think.
That's true.
But we go on our phones, and it's just not the same on a screen as it is actually connecting with people and having a conversation.
Right.
So I think we have to get out of our just day-to-day habit and actually be intentional and put forth that effort, where before we had all this computers and phones, we didn't have to do that. It wasn't even an option. So I think because that is an option now, we do have to take like that extra step. And I think maybe that's a big part of the puzzle that might be missing.
And as we change, I get excited, because when we get it right, then those who will come after us, Wyatt will know how to deal with stress and the things that happen. So it's important that we set the example, but also, when possible, to put healthy traditions in place and things in place so that each generation will learn, from it. So we're excited about today's show. You don't want to go anywhere, but we're going to take a break right now, and we'll see you right after that. Hey everyone, it's CeCe here. Thank you for being a part of my YouTube community. If you enjoy the content from this channel, would you do me a favor and hit like and subscribe? My hope is to create more content that will draw all of us closer to Christ, and your support helps me to spread the gospel. Me and my team have a lot in store for this channel and love to hear your feedback in the comments. Thank you in advance for your participation, and may God continue to bless you. Welcome back. I am so excited about our show on mental health solutions. It is so important, and I am honored to have our guest today, Dr. Caroline Leaf. Hey, Caroline,
Welcome.
how are you?
Hi.
Welcome.
So nice to see you again, CeCe, and to meet you, Ashley. It's been a while.
It's been a while.
Many years since you came to our church.
Yes, and
awesome.
you blessed us so much. So it's so much we want to cover today, and I know time is limited, but let's get started. You've been busy. You've been blessing people for years in this area. So why is it so important to address mental health issues in the church?
Well, the simplest answer to that is that your mental health comes from your mind, and your mind drives everything. So the mind is not the brain. And I think, CeCe, a great place to start, CeCe and Ashley, is to make people help people realize, I've got some props here, that your mind is not your brain. Mm-hmm. You're not controlled by your brain. Your brain is a physical organ that does the bidding of the mind. So one of the first things to help people understand mental health, which is filled with hope, is that your mind and your brain are separate. So where your mind goes, your brain goes. And the reason I'm saying that is that we live in an era where the messaging around mental health is very, very fearful. And it's a lot of, your mind is your brain, the brain produces your thoughts. And if you have anxiety or depression, you have a mental illness, and there's something wrong with your brain, and there's something wrong with your genes, and it's something that's inherited. So there's tremendous fear around it. And unfortunately, that has been going on for about 56 years.
Wow.
And it's the wrong message, and it's not even evidence-based. Yet it's that 85 to 90% of people are under the impression that if they feel depression or anxiety, they have a chemical imbalance, there's something wrong with them as an individual,
Right.
There's something wrong with their brain, and that is not the truth. So really the very first step is to understand that if you are battling with anxiety and depression, those are not illnesses. Those are warning signals that are coming directly from the Spirit of God through your deep depths of your spiritual nature to make you wake up and become aware of something that's going on in your life that you need to pay attention to. And that's radically different from thinking, there's something wrong with me as an individual. Mm-hmm. So you shift that over to, okay, I'm going through something. This is not who I am, but this is how I'm showing up because of what I'm going through. And if I do the work of capturing the thought and renewing the mind, I can actually deconstruct and reconstruct and go forward. So that makes mental health solutions, which is what the show is called,
Right.
one of something that's within our hands, within our control. We don't have to be fearful because the fear itself will actually make you worse off.
That's
So that's kind of a good place to start, and maybe we can dive a little deeper.
Yeah.
Wow.
So what do you think are some things that have contributed to the increase in the anxiety and the depression? Because if it's things that we're taking in, like, do you feel like it's the media, social media? What are some practical things we can exercise to keep the anxiety at bay if this is something that's more in our control, whether through spiritual disciplines or just practical disciplines?
Great question. So our environment affects us, and our spiritual part of us, which we call scientifically the non-conscious mind, N-O-N, non-conscious, not subconscious, not unconscious, non-conscious. That's this deep spiritual part of us, and it's where our wisdom resides, and it's pretty much absorbing the whole environment, and then it's also scanning what is damaging to us, and then making us aware of those things. So one of the key issues to manage our mental health is to recognize that we, by the pure nature and virtue of how God has made us, we are absorbing our environment. Mm-hmm. Our environment affects us. So when we feel things like anxiety and depression, those are not illnesses, as I keep saying. Those are telling us that something's going on in our relationship with the environment. So we hear a lot now of mental health has increased. The Surgeon General released a whole report last year on the fact that children's mental health has never been so bad. And we're getting all these messages. But from the research I've done and the scientists that I work with around the world globally, there is not an increase in mental health issues. There's actually an increase in how we are managing our mind. That's where the pandemic is. We have shifted in how we manage our minds, how we think and feel and choose, how we capture thoughts, how we deconstruct and reconstruct thoughts, which is renewing the mind. We've put that aside and we've become very focused on a medical, biomedical model of everything's about the brain, everything's physical. Things like anxiety and depression have been compared to things like diabetes. And we're told, well, if you have diabetes, you take insulin and that solves the problem. So if you have depression, that's a chemical imbalance, take an antidepressant. You can't even compare those. Diabetes is an actual physical illness that we can identify with tests, and we can target a medication like insulin to the source of the problem. When it comes to anxiety and depression, there is no what we call brain or neurobiological correlate. Also no chemical imbalance. So the cause is not in the brain. The cause is in our relationship with the environment. So in this past 2 years of COVID, or almost 3 years now, people are feeling more depression. They are feeling more anxiety because they're more isolated. They're losing loved ones. They're frightened. There's this unknown factor. So increased depression and anxiety is a completely normal response to an adverse circumstance. So we shouldn't pathologize and medicalize what we as humans are going through, because that then takes the control out of our hands and puts it in the hands of, now you've got to get a diagnosis and a medication, and there's something wrong with you as an individual, which is wrong. We've got to keep it in the hands of community and recognize this is a global issue that's affected the entire communities, and therefore the solution is not in looking at me as an individual, but it is looking at my relationship with the environment. It's giving myself permission to feel the increased anxiety and depression, because it doesn't mean there's something wrong with me. It means that I'm having a very normal human response. Now, the minute you make that perspective shift, you change your neurophysiology. You change how your brain functions. You actually activate the resilience that's inside of you. You enable yourself consciously tune into the depths of your non-conscious. In other words, if I use spiritual language, you actually train yourself to listen more to the Spirit of God. The more you're fearful, the more you block that connection. And then the more you're going to work in a very physical way and get frightened. And that fear will it makes things so much worse. So we need to stand back and say, hey, it's okay. I feel depression. So does everyone else. We all have depression. Is not bad. It's an emotional warning signal. It's a message telling us that there's something going on, and that's okay. Give yourself permission to be messy. So this is a long answer to answer your question, but essentially we have to see that difference and give ourselves permission to be messy, embrace that, process it, and reconceptualize it. And when you do that, you change your neurophysiology, you activate your natural resilience, you wire healthy responses in your mind, brain, and body connection. And then that enables you then to have a sense of acceptance as you go through these changes. And that shows when we have that approach, we don't have mental illness increasing, we have people learning to cope.
Which is so good. So when you're learning how to cope, so if someone is struggling with this, what is their first step to freedom? Do they call a therapist? Do they call a doctor? It sounds like there's other steps that you can take if you're struggling with this.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And I'm so glad that's a brilliant question, CeCe. You worded that so well. Don't go call your doctor, because 95% of psychotropic drugs are given by medical doctors, and I have many friends. I'm not knocking the medical profession, thank goodness for medicine. What I'm saying is that medical doctors are not trained in mind. I train physicians, and they come to me for help, and to people like myself. They get a 2 or 3 week rotation, and that rotation in their training is just on basically diagnosis and medication, and that whole model is actually not evidence-based. So the best person to contact when you are in a bad place is, first of all, yourself. You need to get in touch with yourself, because you live with yourself 24/7. You can't go to your therapist, counselor, coach, pastor, etc. 24/7. You wake up with yourself at night. You dealing with your kids. You are in your work environment. You are dealing with your relationship. So you need to understand that you have the strength in yourself. So first step is to get in touch with yourself. How? It's to give yourself permission to be a mess. My latest book and my podcast, which is literally number 10 in the world, between 1 and 10 globally in mental health because of this messaging. And the message because of the main message which I share is that it's okay to be a mess. Give yourself permission to be a mess.
Yeah.
It's okay to be depression. You're not sinning. You're not evil. You're not sick. You're normal. You're being a human. Don't let this pathologization and medicalization and sort of shameful sort of you sinning you kind of thing. That's not the truth. The truth is that you're a human and you're going through adverse circumstances. So first of all, stand back and give yourself permission to be a mess. And say, it's okay, I'm a mess. And then describe it. Say, okay, how am I feeling? What are my emotions? And say, how am I depression, anxiety, frustration? List them. Literally list them. Then ask yourself, why am I feeling those? What are the statements I'm making about myself? Then write all that down. Just pour your brain on paper.
That's good.
Just write it down. Doesn't matter how messy. Then look at what you've written and say, okay, this is what's happened. Now what can I do? And then get a little action. Now I've described 5 steps. And CeCe and Ashley, that's called a neurocycle. Neuro as in N-E-U-R, neurocycle. It's a system I developed over 38 years ago in clinical practice and doing clinical trials, and I still do clinical trials. I'm constantly updating this system. And that's a very simple overview of a system that teaches you how to get your mind to change the brain and the body. So it's a way of accessing your wisdom to then deal with the messy mind. Because at our core, we made in God's image.
Right.
And at our core, we are wise. And that wisdom is connected to God, who is the ultimate wisdom. So this neurocycle teaches you how to consciously get in touch with your wisdom and then drive this wisdom in the right direction. God is loving and kind, as we know. So therefore, we need to apply loving kindness to ourselves. We don't need to pathologize ourselves. We need to give ourselves permission to have our stories, to tell our stories, to validate our stories. And this approach that I'm describing, this concept of allowing yourself to be messy, allowing yourself to tune into what those signals are, going through these little 5 steps daily over a period of time. And we can talk about those details in a moment. The general thing is get in touch with yourself, do these 5 steps. That teaches you how to get your conscious mind connected with the Spirit of God, capture the thought, because the thought has got memories in it, and that's the details. And when you capture that, you bring that thought into the conscious mind and it becomes weaker. Now you have control over that thought, which is made up of details. You can then find the origin story, because thoughts look a bit like trees and they have a root system. And this would be a healthy thought and this would be a toxic thought. And we have lots of these in our mind and brain, a combination.
Right.
So what we want to do is tune in consciously to our signals. The signals will then take us to the thought. The branches over here are how you see yourself, your self-talk, why you've got these emotions, why your behaviors are a certain way, why you've got this pain in your body, why your perspective on life, what's your self-talk. And then you say, where does this come from? And it's all done objectively. It's okay. This is not who you are. This is because of. So let's find the source. And then once you find the source, which is your root system, you can then say, okay, well, that's the source. I don't know why that's happened. I can't tell you why COVID happened, why this one died, why that money happened, why this relationship, why this abuse. But I see that I'm showing up because of that. So now I can reconstruct this. My story will never change, but the way this looks inside of me and the way it plays out into my future, that will change. So now this can get smaller and smaller. Then I can grow a healthy way of responding. I can remember, you can just barely see the toxic thought, but now I have a new way of responding. And this takes time. There's no quick fix. There's no pill. There's no medication that's going to do this. This is pure you working through this over time.
Wow.
And I've worked out the time and I can link it to a story, but let me stop there and if you want to unpack some of that. I said a lot. So
No, you said it so
what were
good.
the 5 steps, though? I think you said there's 5 steps to the neurocycle.
Yes. So I've got an app as well.
Yes.
And it's called
Tell us about your app.
So the app is what I did because I want to make mental health affordable and accessible to everyone. Not everyone can afford therapy.
Right.
Not everyone can afford counseling and not you. And also, you can go to a church, but there isn't someone there 24/7.
Right.
You live with yourself 24/7.
Right.
So what I did was take all the science, all my clinical expertise, and put it into a simple audio-driven app. And so the app is called Neurocycle, and it takes you through these 5 steps, which are to gather awareness, reflect, 2 steps of writing, and then an active reach. And you do that. When you do this, you can put all you can put scriptures in, you can put different techniques in, and I guide you through that.
Okay.
And when you do those steps for 15 to 45 minutes a day over 21 days, you literally change the messy mind into a wise mind. It becomes wise. Wow. You change the structure in your brain. So you change these that look like this in the brain into these that look like this. You also change your body health right down to the level of your DNA, right down to the proteins in your cells, right down to the subatomic level. You're literally changing that, which means you're changing your physical health and improving that by 35 to 98%. I've shown with this neurocycle, with the research I've done over these 38 years, that when you manage your mind in this way, which is purely the science of capturing thoughts in your mind,
the word of God.
You do this, you can get anxiety and depression under control by up to 81%, because they're not diseases, they're signals. And you can therefore you can gain up to 35 years of physical health in 9 weeks by managing your mind. These are the kinds of
I so believe that.
This is God's stuff. I mean, this is when you do it God's way.
Right.
You do it God's
Absolutely.
way.
You are going to make these shifts in your mind, brain, and body. And I teach this globally in every religion, every philosophy, every scientific community you can imagine. I'm teaching the same stuff because I'm teaching humans how to manage their mental health. Wow. So it's really quite simple. So for the first 21 days, you're going to do 15 to 45 minutes. But you can't stop there, because if you stop there, these two are the same size. You can easily revert back to that.
Right.
Habits and changes in behavior take 63 days minimum. So you then have to still do the 5 steps of the neurocycle for another 42 days, but only 5 minutes a day. So it's 15 to 45 minutes the first 21 days. And then the second 42 days, it's around about 5 minutes a day. That then shrinks this and makes it super small and makes this big. And that's where we can see application in our life. We'll actually have change happening in our life. If you just go to 21 days, you'll know how you want to be, but you'll be frustrated because you're stuck. I know where I want to go. Yeah. I know why I'm doing these things, but you get stuck.
Right.
And that's where people get very frustrated. Then they think that there's something wrong, and they say things like the devil's attacking me and all stupid things that people, they don't need to say it, but that's what's said. And people get totally frustrated. And that then makes their mental health worse. And then they feel like they've failed as a person. You as a person need to give yourself love and compassion. And recognize that it's hard, it's tough. There's no quick fix. You go along, do this 63 days, and then you can get those shifts happening.
I think one of the things that you're saying is so important, because we can be so hard on ourselves. And you got to love yourself. You got to be patient with yourself, because God loves you.
Yeah.
And I love what you're sharing today, because it's giving so much hope. It's
Lots
reminding
of hope.
us
Absolutely.
that God created us in his image, and he's given us power to have the victory over these things that we're going through, the adversary.
Absolutely.
CeCe,
what you just said over there is, it's such an interesting fact. Our whole psychoneurobiology, psycho meaning mind, neuro meaning brain, biology meaning body. That's your spirit, soul, body link. Okay, so your spirit is your mind, the non-conscious and the conscious mind, and then your brain and body are the physical. Now, your mind part, the spirit and soul, are 99% of who you are. Right. 99 to 99, and the 1% is the brain and the body. So where your mind goes, your brain and body follow.
Absolutely.
So we are managing our minds.
Jeez.
We are then managing our brain and our body, which then outputs into how we're managing our life. So that's psychoneurobiology. I'm actually a psychoneurobiologist studying this connection, and it's pretty much the spirit soul body connection and how we do that. So we are managing that with love and kindness. When you operate in love and kindness towards yourself, you change the frequency of energy around your brain and body. And that's not weird. It's energy that's allowing us to do the Zoom. God is the source of all energy. So energy is not a weird word. People get frightened in the church. Then you can't have the Zoom.
Right.
You can't use your phone. That's energy. God is the source of all energy. The fact that we're alive and living, that's energy. Our mind is a form of energy.
Right.
What we are doing with the mind is we are taking this energy to process life, our brain and body, and then we show up in life. So the mind needs the brain and body for you to show up at this table in this conversation. But when we die, our mind, our spirit and soul move out of our brain and our body. So our spirit soul, which is our mind, it moves out of our body and we weigh less. And then our body starts disintegrating. So this shows the power of the mind. That 1% physical brain and body have to be driven by the power of the mind. And the mind is connected to the Spirit of God, whether you believe in God or not. The fact that you're breathing, you connected to the source.
Right.
And how you manage that is going to determine your mental health.
Okay.
So good.
It's all about mind management. And mind management is all about capturing thoughts, renewing your mind, tuning into the depths of your spiritual level. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Yes.
I was just about to
Wow,
say,
so
so
good.
a lot of this is kind of boils down to people kind of underestimating the power of the mind and what you're thinking of, what you're meditating on. What can people do? I have some ideas of my own just in my own life, but like, because, you know, we can't control all the circumstances around us, but what can we do to help guard our thoughts and to kind of minimize the noise of what might be coming against us when we are starting to feel, because a lot of times people feel anxious and like, why am I anxious? And I know you said stop, reflect, think about like, what am I feeling? Okay, why am I feeling this way? So what are some of the other practical things we can do when we're experiencing in the moment anxiety to kind of help drown out the noise? Or what are some things you think we can eliminate from our lives?
The combating.
Yeah.
So that's a lot of excellent questions, and it's a lot of stuff. The first thing is that when we're in a state of high stimulation and high overwhelm, is to decompress, because when you're in that state, you it's very hard for you to consciously tune into your unconscious. In other words, it's very hard to kind of tune into wisdom, and we can get overwhelmed and then we get very reactive. And that's when we say what we regret and do what we regret and so on. So the first thing is to decompress, to get our neurophysiology under control, because our brain is doing just what our mind tells it to do. So if you're feeling overwhelmed, that means that the brain is getting a chaotic message, and the brain gets chaotic, and then the body gets chaotic, and then that feeds back, and then we feel overwhelmed. So what I've done is I put into my app, I put there's 3 little blocks here. I'm pointing to a blue block. This is called decompression activities, and there's a whole lot of them in, and I'm always adding new stuff to the app.
Okay.
And those are great to just click on, and you can literally, I walk you through a 2 to 3 minute, there's 37, I think, decompression activities in there. And that calms down your mind, brain, body physiology, so that when you're in that more peaceful state, then you can move into doing the neurocycle quickly, because you can do the neurocycle for patterns, big trauma, daily, in the way I described. So there's 2 ways to drive your mind. The one way is to decompress. Decompression is to get you into a state where you can focus. So when you're in that focus state, you might say, okay, this is happening a lot. There's a pattern in my life. As soon as you see a pattern, which is something that happens more than once, and it's on a regular basis, and it's disrupting how you're functioning, relationships, mental health in general, but that's relationships, work, whatever. Anything that's a pattern, that's going to take cycles of 63 days. So then you make a decision. Okay, I see this as a pattern. That is okay. It's okay to be a mess. It's not who I am. You give yourself that kind of self-talk to keep yourself calm. You make a note, get out a little diary or something, write it down, and say, okay, I'm going to start from tomorrow, and I'm going to start doing a 63-day neurocycle. You might find if you do that 63-day neurocycle, you might find that you actually are bringing up a lot of trauma, and you may need more than one 63-day cycle, which is fun. I've had some patients who, when they start this, they start seeing, hey, this is linked to some trauma from childhood, or trauma from an early marriage, or trauma from whatever, something being bullied at school, or something that happened in your life, or racism, or whatever. So the bigger, so you might need more than one cycle. That's the big stuff. But there's also the day-to-day stuff where you've got to keep yourself focused in the moment. So you can use the neurocycle in 5 minutes. You can literally do a decompression in 1 minute. You can learn those. You can click on those. And then I have over here the little orange block. I have mini neurocycles that help you. So let's say you're having an anxiety attack or a panic attack, or someone's being toxic to you in your environment, and you've got to keep it together, but there's this toxic environment. You just go somewhere, press play, and within 3 to 5 minutes, I take you through the 5 steps of the neurocycle to help you in the moment. So I'll give you an example. I was at the dentist just recently, and dentists are notoriously, they always run late. And I had a huge meeting that was about to start. Everyone was at my office. This dentist was running an hour late. So I put this timing in that I'd get back in time. Now I'm running this research team. It's a big research trial that I'm running. I have 5, 6 people sitting in my offices waiting for me, and nothing can start till I'm there. So this is not the end of the world, but I'm starting to feel very overwhelmed. This dentist got his hand in my mouth, and I've got to get to a meeting, and I can't even text these people to tell them I'm running late. So I started feeling so anxious, and that my whole body tensed up, and the dentist started saying, hey, hang on, you've got to relax. I can't finish this. So I said, take the thing, indicated, take it out. And I just said, I have to get to him. So how long are you going to be? I need to text my team. And so then what I did was so he just said another 20 minutes or whatever it was. And then I did a neurocycle. So in my mind, I was so anxious. My heart was beating. I felt so bad because these people had come from all over the place. It was a really important meeting. They were reliant on me. So that all of those factors made me anxious. So I gave myself permission. I gathered awareness. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling frustrated. I'm getting almost irritated with the dentist. I can feel my body tensing up. My perspective is, oh my gosh, this is going to be a disaster. So those are 4 warning signals: emotions, my behaviors, my bodily sensation, and my perspective. They were all getting affected. Now I calmly analyzed those and said, okay, this is okay to be a mess. It's a justified situation that I need. So what am I going to do? I couldn't write it down because I was in the dentist chair, but I reflected and said, okay, why am I feeling like each of these? And quickly gave myself an answer. I couldn't write it down, so I visualized, all right, they're sitting there, I'm here, I'm going to grab my phone, I'm quickly going to text. I can't do anything about this. I'm going to be there soon. So I texted and I said, okay, this is where I am. I'm going to be 20 minutes. Start this activity. Do this. I need this done and this done. By the time you've done this, I'll be there. And I then sent the text. The dentist carried on, and I got back in 20 minutes. And the point is that they did what I told them to do. Right. So I didn't waste their time. But until I calmed myself down, I couldn't think of the activity that I told him to do. I couldn't think of it. All I was, oh my gosh, I've messed up the meeting. And it blocked my ability to have wisdom. And this is not a life and death situation, but it did affect 5 people that are very busy people. And it was frustrating. And I was not going to run that meeting well because I was so stressed. So by doing the neurocycle, it took me less than 3 minutes to get myself into that state, send a text, the dentist could finish, I could get back, no one's time was wasted. But in the past, I would have got stuck.
Yeah,
that's good. Another example is a lot of people get stuck saying, if only, regret. That they do something and then they get stuck in regret. And, oh, why didn't I wear this? Or why didn't I say that? Or why didn't I do this? Or why did I hand it like this? And they spend so much time getting stuck there that they don't move forward. Neurocycle is great for that. You can either just press the little button and listen, or you can, in your mind, why am I feeling like this? And you go through the little 5 steps. You can do that in 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Yes. Okay. 2 things I would love to ask you real quick. Number one, what about when people are struggling? You've given us great solutions. What about when you are connected to someone who you know is struggling? The people who are around those people, how should we advise them? How do we help them recognize where they are and where they need to go? What is the best way? Because sometimes you can say the wrong thing. Right. You don't know exactly what to say or what to do for people. So I really want to help people out who are connected to those who they know are suffering mentally.
Well, that's such an important question, CeCe, and thanks for asking that. The first thing to not do is don't say, I'm going to pray for you, or I'm going to give you scriptures, or read this, or take this book, or read these, or memorize. That immediately puts a burden on a person and they don't feel validated. Also, never say to a person, I know what you're going through, because you don't. No one is an expert on anyone's experience except yourself. So for us, and I know we mean well, but both of those
So you saying that I'm going to pray for you, you feel like that's going to put a burden on somebody?
Don't do that immediately, because it's, and call it pass the buck prayer. Because what people will, and this is from my experience of working with people, and we now reach millions. And the people hate that kind of thing as a port of call, because it sounds like you're passing the buck. It sounds like you're saying, hey, I want you as a human here with me. You're opposite me at the table. You're sitting next to me. I want you, your human warmth, to connect with me. That's what, when someone's in distress, all they want is for someone to validate what they're going through. And just say, hey, I'm here for you. I don't understand what you're going through, but I want you to know I'm here for you. What do you need? Can I sit next to you? Can I hold your hand? Always ask what they need in the moment, because our instinct often is also going to hold them. Sometimes people can't be held in that situation. But what everyone needs is to know that I hear you, I see you, I validate you, I'm here for you. What do you need?
Got it.
Even sometimes it's just sitting next to them.
Yeah, That's
we
good.
can come with the prayer and the suggestions and the
Later.
try the neurocycle and all that
Yeah.
stuff when they're ready. They first need to have the experience validated. Then the next thing is allow them to talk, even if what they're saying shocks you,
Got it.
even if what they're saying sounds terrible. You tell them, hey, it's okay to be a mess. It's totally
Give
scientific.
them
It's totally
permission,
godly to be a mess.
I love it.
Talk. I'm here to listen.
Love
There's
it.
nothing you can say that's bad
Love it.
because all just coming out. And then that opens the door to them telling their story. People need to be able to tell their story, not being judged. And don't interrupt. That's the third thing. Just let people talk. And when they're ready, they'll say, what do you think? Or, thank you for being with me. And maybe that first session, they won't ask you for any advice, but maybe they'll phone you or text you or say, could we talk again? Or is there something that you know that I could do? Or can you pray? People will ask you when they're ready, but first they want to be heard. They want to be that human connection.
Got it.
That's good
Love
advice.
it. That's
That's really
great
good
advice. And the other thing is when is it the right time, or what do you look for to know it's time to maybe see somebody else or go to a doctor or needing help outside of what you can give yourself?
Excellent question. I'll just reiterate again. Don't go to a doctor before a therapist. Get to a therapist or a counselor or a coach.
Got it.
Because a doctor is not trained. They have 15-minute little sessions and they're going to do a symptom checklist and they're going to medicate you. And those psychotropic medications, CeCe and Ashley, are not solving a problem. They don't fix anything.
Right.
Where insulin actually helps to fix diabetes, helps to give what our body needs. An SSRI, an antidepressant, for example, is not putting something back in the brain that's missing. It's not restoring a balance. It's not fixing anything. What those psychotropic drugs, anti-anxiety meds, antidepressants, those kind of things, they're considered drugs. They're not even considered medicines. What they do is they numb the brain and they reduce the intensity of the feeling in the moment, but they're not fixing the problem. They also cause the brain to change. So when you stop them or you take less of them, your brain has withdrawal. And that's actually worse than the problem.
Yeah.
So if you think of it this way, if you've got an issue in a relationship and you take something that numbs your brain, because they basically work like cocaine or street drugs or alcohol. They're psychoactive. They're not fixing. They change the brain state.
Got it.
So you feel less intensity. So in the moment, like if someone has a crisis in the moment, it's a good idea just to maybe give someone a sedative if they've been raped or an antidepressant in the moment, 24 hours, 48 hours, but not chronically, because chronically, which is long-term, changes the brain. And unfortunately, though, they are prescribed chronically. So people are sitting with a lot of the dependency that's been created and changes in the brain. But the problem is that when the drug wears off, the problem is still there. Now you have an additional problem of brain damage. Fortunately, we can withdraw. Anyone listening, please don't just stop your medications, your drugs. Don't stop them because your brain has adapted and it'll cause worse problems, even suicidal ideation. So if you are deciding to perhaps look at another route and not take these medications, you need to get with a medical doctor who understands withdrawal. Now, on my site, drleaf.com, and on my podcast, Cleaning Up the Mental Mess, that's the name. I will send you the link. I've interviewed some of the top experts in the world who teach on withdrawal.
Okay.
And I'll send you a link. The Royal College of Psychiatrists has an incredibly good guide for withdrawal. Now, I'm just saying that in case someone's on a medication, but those are not solving the problem. We have to do the work. We have to actually go through the work of seeing why am I feeling like this. And it's painful and hard. So another part of this is to recognize that it's not easy. You will get worse before you get better. I've had some patients, as they've started working through their stuff, that landed up going into states of heavy depression. And that's all normal.
All of it's a part of the healing process. Yeah.
Exactly.
Cool.
You're grieving lost time. You said, and that's a normal response. If you've been raped and abused for years of your life and you're depressed from grieving, that's a very normal response. You don't want to numb that.
Absolutely.
Right. Oh,
that's really important. So to know when to look for someone for yourself or for helping someone else is as the neurocycle is a great place to start because it starts creating an awareness and it gives people hope that I can manage it. But sometimes things turn up that are overwhelming and they battle with perspective. And that's where a counselor, coach, a therapist is recommended. And one that's not in the biomedical models. It's not one that's going to label you. You don't want to be labeled. You just want your story heard. So we've also set up a system now called, we have neurocycle certified facilitators. So those are therapists, counselors, coaches, even pastors that we've trained
Wow, that is awesome.
in how to
Caroline,
use
that
this.
is
So we can
awesome.
send you, we have our first group of 30 students coming through that will be qualified by the end of October.
Oh,
Okay.
And we
wow.
can send it to you, and they'll be able to find a neurocycle facilitator who can then help them one-on-one.
That is a
They go
blessing.
through the app, but then they've got that extra one-on-one. And if they need more help, then our facilitators are trained to guide them to maybe a different type of therapist, or a therapist who can manage certain aspects that are
Right.
very deep and that kind
Right.
of thing.
Well, thank you
That's awesome.
so much. That is so awesome for all of these incredible solutions. We're going to close the show, but before we do, would you please pray for those who are hurting so that they can find wholeness?
Absolutely. I thank you, God, that you've made us with an incredible mind. And thank you that our mind is wise, and that when we tune into that wisdom, we can actually change things in our life. We can capture those thoughts, we can renew our mind, and we can improve our mental health. And this is an ongoing, lifelong journey. That it's not, we don't have to feel guilty and shame for feeling sad or depressed. We don't have to feel guilty and shame for feeling guilty and depressed or shame. We can see everything that we feel and go through as a message from you telling us that we need to pay attention and find out the because of behind that. Yeah. And I thank you, God, that you've made us with the ability to be messy and to manage that mess, to tune into your wisdom. And I thank you that this is how we can, as humans, manage our mental health and change the world one person at a time. Thank you. Amen.
Amen, amen, amen. God is so good.
Yes,
so much
thank
hope.
you so much.
So much hope. Thanks so much for joining us, Caroline, and thank you all for joining Generations. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.